crawling through the jagged glass of her overturned car. Elena clutched a blood-stained ledger to her chest while the smell of leaking gasoline filled the ravine. She didn't feel the glass in her palms or the warmth of the blood matting her hair. She only felt the crushing weight of the stage lights awaiting her at the town hall. Just as she stumbled toward the entrance to expose the woman who had systematically dismantled her life, she saw him. Her husband, Marcus, stood center stage, his voice amplified by the speakers as he held up a signed document. "My wife is no longer in her right mind," he declared to the hushed crowd. "For her own safety, I've signed the papers to have her committed." The police moved in before she could scream, their handcuffs gleaming under the sterile fluorescent lights. Elena looked down at the ledger, the proof of $1 million fraud, and then at the man she had shared a bed with for 10 years, realizing the trap hadn't been set by her enemies, but by her own family. As the officers forced her toward the exit, she realized the emergency garden gala wasn't a party at all. It was a funeral for her freedom. Now, she had exactly 60 seconds to use her professional crisis training to manipulate the very men arresting her, or she would disappear into a psychiatric ward forever. The screen flickered once, then died. Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard, still warm from the last frantic search. She exhaled through her nose, sharp and controlled, the way she did before a parent-teacher conference with an angry father. The office smelled of stale coffee and the lemon-scented cleaner the janitor had used that morning. Too much of it, like he'd dumped the bottle in the corner. She jabbed the power button. Nothing. Her phone buzzed against the desk. A text from Dr. Hargrove. "Accreditation team arrives at 9 a.m. Your wellness reports are priority. Confirm receipt." Elena's thumb twitched over the screen. She didn't reply. Instead, she yanked the power cord from the wall, waited 3 seconds, and then plugged it back in. The monitor stayed black. A cold prickle ran up her spine. She reached for the mouse, rolled it. The cursor didn't move. Then she saw it. The folder icon on the desktop, the one labeled Student Wellness 2023. Now grayed out, its contents vanished. She double-clicked. The system whirred, then spat out an error. "File not found." Her breath hitched. She dragged the folder to the trash. Empty. 48 hours before the review, years of work, data points on student anxiety, intervention metrics, the very pulse of the school's emotional health, had been systematically cauterized from the hard drive. This wasn't a glitch. The digital wipe felt surgical. A deliberate erasure designed to leave her standing naked before the accreditation board. Panic, cold and oily, slid down her throat, but she forced it back. She was a counselor. She dealt in crises. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening terminal windows and diagnostic logs, searching for the ghost of a footprint. Who had the credentials? Who had the motive? The school's reputation rested on these reports. Without them, the wellness program looked like a hollow shell, a waste of district funding. The rhythmic tapping of her keys was interrupted by the shrill ring of her desk phone. She glanced at the caller ID. Emergency line. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Mitchell," she said, her voice dropping into that low, clinical register she used to anchor others. "Elena, it's Leo." The voice on the other end was thin, trembling, the sound of a boy standing on a ledge. "I can't do it. The pressure, the tests. My dad said if I fail one more time, I'm out. I'm at the bridge, Elena, the one by the park." Elena's eyes remained fixed on the black monitor, on the void where her career used to be. But her mind shifted instantly. The technical disaster became background noise. "Leo, stay with me. Breathe with me. 1, 2, 3. Tell me what you see right now. Not the water, Leo. Tell me the color of the cars passing by. She typed with her left hand, trying to force a reboot of the secondary server, while her right hand gripped the receiver until her knuckles turned white. She was a bridge between two collapses. The digital logs showed a remote access login at 2:14 a.m., someone from outside the building. But Leo was crying, a jagged rhythmic sobbing that tore through the sterile air of her office. Blue? Leo whispered. A blue truck just went by. Good. That's good, Leo. Keep looking for blue. I'm not hanging up. I'm right here. She managed to trigger a trace on the login. The IP address was masked, routed through 3 different servers in 3 different countries. Whoever did this knew exactly how to hide. But she couldn't focus on the who yet. She had to keep Leo talking. She had to be the anchor while her own ship was sinking. The sweat began to bead on her forehead, stinging her eyes. But she didn't wipe it away. She just kept talking, kept typing, a woman split between saving a life and saving a legacy. The door to her office swung open with a sudden, jarring lack of ceremony. Marcus stood in the threshold, looking like a man who had never known a moment of genuine desperation in his life. His cashmere sweater was perfectly pressed, his blonde hair swept back with just the right amount of product. He looked at Elena, hunched over her dead screen with a phone pressed to her ear, and sighed a long, theatrical breath of disappointment. Elena, for God's sake, you're still here. He didn't wait for an answer. Stepping into the room and filling it with the scent of expensive sandalwood and the arrogance of the comfortably wealthy. I've been calling you for 20 minutes. Mother's gala starts in an hour. It's an emergency garden meeting, she said. You know how she gets when the seating chart isn't perfect. Elena didn't look up. She held up a finger, her eyes squeezed shut as she listened to Leo's ragged breathing. Leo, are you still there? Tell me another color. Marcus scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. Another student crisis? Elena, the world isn't going to stop spinning because some teenager is having a bad day. We have obligations. Gloria has the board members coming tonight. If we aren't there, it looks like a slight. It looks like, well, it looks like you don't care about this family. Marcus, stop. Elena hissed into the receiver, though she kept her voice soft for Leo. I am in the middle of something. My files are gone. Someone wiped the server, and I have a student on the line who needs me. The files can wait until tomorrow. It will fix it, Marcus said, his voice rising with a petulant edge. He walked over to her desk and tapped his watch. Mother is expecting us. She's already stressed about the parental rights group making noise. She needs her family around her. She needs a united front, Elena, not a wife who's obsessed with spreadsheets while her social standing rots. The word united felt like a slap. Elena felt the familiar weight of Gloria's shadow creeping into the room, draped over Marcus like a shroud. To him, the garden gala was a matter of life and death. To Elena, it was a gilded cage designed to keep her from the work that actually mattered. I am not leaving, Marcus, Elena said, her voice trembling with a suppressed rage that made her go very, very still. Go to the gala. Tell Gloria I'm busy saving the career she spent the last decade trying to diminish. Tell her I'm busy making sure a child lives to see tomorrow. Marcus's face hardened. The watery blue of his eyes turned to ice. You're being hysterical, Elena. This is exactly what Mother talks about. You let this place consume you. You're choosing a job over your husband. Again. I am choosing a life over a party, she countered, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through his bluster. Now get out. I have to call the paramedics for Leo. Marcus stared at her for a long second, his thumb rubbing his wedding ring in that nervous, rhythmic circle. He didn't offer to help. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply turned on his heel and walked out, the click of the door behind him sounding like a final gavel. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a siren. Leo was safe. The paramedics had found him. But Elena was alone in the dark, the black monitor staring back at her like an accusing eye. She reached for her tea, but it was cold, a skin of oil forming on the surface. She turned back to the backup hard drive, the small silver brick that held the only remaining copies of her work. She had pulled it from her bag, ready to plug it in, when the light in the hallway flickered and died. A floorboard creaked outside her door. Not the normal rhythmic step of a janitor, but something heavier, more hesitant. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She stood up slowly, her hand closing around the bronze paperweight Gloria had given her for her birthday. A heavy, ornate thing shaped like an owl, a symbol of wisdom that now felt like a weapon. The door handle turned, slow, deliberate. A man stepped into the room. He was wearing a dark hoodie and a black ski mask that looked a size too small, the fabric straining over his nose. He didn't look at the computer. He didn't look at the expensive printer. His eyes went straight to the silver hard drive in Elena's hand. "Give it here," he growled. His voice was rough, unpracticed, the sound of someone playing a part he wasn't quite comfortable with. "Who sent you?" Elena asked, her voice steady even as her knees threatened to buckle. She stepped back, putting the desk between them. "Was it Gloria? Did she hire you to finish what the virus started?" The man didn't answer. He lunged across the desk, his large, scarred hands reaching for the drive. Elena swung the paperweight with a desperate, uncoordinated force. The bronze owl caught him on the side of the head, a sickening thud that echoed in the small office. The man grunted, stumbling back, his hand flying to his temple. "Get out!" Elena screamed, her voice breaking the professional mask she had worn all day. "Get out before I kill you." She swung again, this time catching his shoulder. He hissed in pain, his eyes wide with a sudden, sharp fear. He hadn't expected a fight. He had expected a terrified woman who would hand over the drive and weep. But Elena was the daughter of a man who had been destroyed by lies. She knew what happened when you stopped fighting. The intruder backed away, his boots scuffing against the linoleum. He glanced at the door, then back at Elena, who stood with the paperweight raised, her face a mask of primal defiance. With a final, muttered curse, he turned and fled into the darkened hallway. Elena stood there for a long time, the bronze owl heavy in her hand, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Her shoulder throbbed where she had twisted it during the struggle, a dull, pulsing ache that felt like it was radiating from her very bones. She looked down at her hand. It was shaking so hard she had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion. She sank into her chair, the hard drive clutched to her chest like a talisman. The physical violation of her office felt worse than the digital wipe. They were coming for her now. Not just her reputation, not just her files, but her. She needed to know how he got in. The school was supposed to be secure. She grabbed her coat and the hard drive, locking the office door with trembling fingers. She didn't go to her car. Instead, she slipped through the shadows of the administrative wing, heading toward the rear exit where the staff parking lot met the woods. She had a meeting to keep. A whistleblower, a teacher who had been at the school as long as the bricks themselves, had sent her a cryptic text an hour ago. "I saw something. Midnight. Behind the gym." The air outside was crisp, smelling of damp earth and the faint, metallic tang of an approaching storm. Elena moved through the darkness, her sensible flats making no sound on the pavement. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life. Margaret was waiting by the rusted equipment shed, her gray cardigan wrapped tight around her. She looked older in the moonlight, the lines on her face deep and shadowed. "You're late," Margaret said, her voice a sharp, dry rasp. "I was attacked," Elena said, her voice flat. "In my office. Someone tried to take the backup." Margaret didn't look surprised. She just adjusted her glasses, her green eyes scanning the parking lot. "They're getting desperate. Gloria doesn't like loose ends. She likes her victories clean." "You saw her? You saw Gloria here?" Elena stepped closer, her heart hammering. "I need a statement, Margaret. I need you to tell the board what you saw." Margaret looked at her, a strange, pitying expression crossing her face. "I saw a car, Elena. A black Mercedes. The one Gloria drives when she wants to be noticed. It was parked right outside the side entrance at 2 a.m. the night the files went missing." "And you saw her? You saw Gloria get out?" Margaret hesitated. She tapped her fingers against her thigh, a rhythmic, nervous sound. "I saw the door open. I saw someone get out. But it wasn't Gloria, Elena." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Elena felt a cold sweat break out on her neck. "What do you mean? Who was it?" "It was your girl." "Sarah," Margaret said, the words falling like stones into a still pond. "She walked up to the car. She didn't look forced. She didn't look scared. She just reached into her pocket, pulled out a set of keys, your keys, Elena, and handed them to the person in the driver's seat. Then she took an envelope, tucked it into her bag, and walked back inside like she was just finishing a late shift." Elena felt the air leave her lungs. Sarah, her secretary, the woman who brought her coffee every morning, who knew the names of all her students, who had sat in her office and cried when her own mother died. Sarah had been the one to open the door. Sarah had been the one to hand over the keys to her destruction. "Are you sure?" Elena whispered, her voice cracking. "I've been teaching for 30 years, Elena. I know when a student is lying, and I know when a colleague is selling out. I saw her face in the dome light." It was Sarah. Elena turned away, looking back at the dark silhouette of the school. The building that had been her sanctuary now felt like a tomb. Every smile Sarah had given her, every "don't worry, I've got this email," every shared lunch, it was all a performance. A long, slow-motion betrayal funded by the woman who wanted Elena erased. She didn't thank Margaret. She couldn't. She just walked back to her car, her movements mechanical, her mind a white-hot blur of realization. The mole wasn't some distant enemy. The mole was the person she had trusted most. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and shadows. Elena pulled into her driveway at 3 a.m., her body feeling like it was made of lead. She just wanted to sleep. She wanted to close her eyes and pretend that when she woke up, the files would be back. The intruder would be a dream. And Sarah would still be the friend she thought she knew. But as the headlights swept across the front of the house, she saw it. Her car, the sensible sedan she had worked so hard to pay for, was slumped on its rims. All 4 tires had been slashed, the rubber gaping like open wounds. She killed the engine, the silence of the suburban night pressing in on her. She stepped out of the car, her feet crunching on the gravel. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at the ruined tires and felt a strange, detached sense of clarity. She walked to the front door, her hand reaching for her keys. She paused. The keypad for the security system, the one Marcus had insisted was state-of-the-art, was dark. The small green light that usually signaled armed was dead. She pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. The house was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a held breath. She moved through the kitchen, her hand trailing along the counter. The smell of lavender hand sanitizer was gone, replaced by something cloying and sweet. She walked up the stairs, her heart a dull thud in her ears. She pushed open the door to the master bedroom. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting long skeletal shadows across the bed. There, resting perfectly in the center of her white pillow, was a single black lily. Elena froze. The scent hit her, sickly, thick, like rotting honey. Her throat began to tighten, a phantom constriction. She was deathly allergic to lilies. Even the pollen in the air could send her into anaphylactic shock. This wasn't a warning. It was a death warrant. She backed out of the room, her hand over her mouth, her eyes watering. She stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air that didn't smell like poison. She found Marcus in the guest room, asleep, his breathing deep and even. She shook him, her fingers digging into his shoulder. "Marcus, wake up!" He groaned, blinking against the light she flicked on. "Elena, what time is it? You're late." Mother was furious. "Someone was in the house, Marcus," she hissed, her voice a jagged edge of terror. "The security system is down. My tires are slashed, and there's a lily on my pillow, a black lily." Marcus sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at her, his expression shifting from confusion to a weary, condescending pity. "A flower? Elena, you're exhausted. You've been working 20-hour days. You probably just... I don't know. Maybe the florist delivered something and I forgot to tell you." "A florist? At 3 a.m.? Into our bedroom?" She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the hallway. "Look at the tires, Marcus. Look at the keypad. Someone disarmed it from the inside." Marcus pulled his arm away, his face hardening. "Elena, stop. You're being hysterical. This is the stress talking. You're imagining conspiracies because you're failing at work and you want someone to blame. The tires were probably just kids, pranksters. And the security system? It's been glitchy for weeks. I told you I'd call the guy." "Glitchy? It was disarmed, Marcus. And the lily? You know what that flower does to me." He stood up, towering over her, his voice dropping into that low, reasonable tone that felt like a chokehold. "It's just a flower, Elena. Maybe it's a peace offering from Sarah. Or maybe you're just looking for a reason to be a victim so you don't have to admit you lost those files yourself." Elena stared at him. She looked at the man she had shared a bed with for 10 years, and for the first time, she saw the void where his loyalty should have been. He wasn't just dismissing her, he was gaslighting her. He was protecting the narrative his mother had written for them. "You're not going to help me," she said, her voice turning cold. "I am helping you," Marcus said, reaching out to pat her cheek. She flinched away. "I'm telling you to go to sleep. We'll deal with the tires in the morning. Everything will look better when you've had some rest." He turned back to the bed, pulling the covers up. Elena stood in the doorway, the scent of the lily still clinging to her clothes, and realized she was more alone in this house than she had been in the dark parking lot. She didn't go to sleep. She sat in the kitchen, the bronze owl paperweight on the table in front of her, and watched the sun rise. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Protest planned at Mitchell High. Parental rights group to gather at 9 a.m. to demand accountability for radical wellness curriculum. Gloria. The timing was perfect. The accreditation committee would arrive to find a mob at the gates, a server wiped of data, and a lead counselor who looked like she was unraveling. It was a masterpiece of social assassination. Elena knew she couldn't wait for the morning. She had to find Sarah. She had to get the truth before the mob took over. She called a cab, her hands shaking as she typed the address of the local diner where Sarah always went for breakfast before her shift. The diner was a relic of chrome and red vinyl, the air thick with the smell of old grease and burnt coffee. Elena spotted Sarah in a corner booth, her auburn curls messy, her hands trembling as she held a mug. Elena slid into the booth opposite her. Sarah jumped, her coffee splashing onto the table. "Elena, what are you doing here? You look terrible." "I know what you did, Sarah," Elena said, her voice a low, vibrating hum of fury. "I know about the keys. I know about the car. Why? Why would you do it? Why would you do?" Sarah's face crumpled. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She just looked down at the puddle of coffee on the table. "I didn't have a choice, Elena. My mother, the debts she left. Gloria said she'd take care of it. She said it was just some files. She said no one would get hurt. No one would get hurt. Someone broke into my office. They tried to kill me with a flower, Sarah." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, the tears starting to track through her freckles. "I'm so sorry. I tried to tell her to stop, but she has photos, Elena. Photos of me, of things I did when I was younger. She said she'd ruin me. She's ruining everyone." Elena leaned forward, her eyes boring into Sarah's. "Give me the names. Who did she hire? How did she get the virus on the server?" Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but her eyes suddenly widened, looking past Elena toward the door. A group of men and women in parental rights t-shirts marched into the diner. At their head was Vince, a local thug with a broken nose and a sneer that looked permanent. He walked straight to their booth, his shadow falling over Elena. Well, Vince said, his voice booming through the quiet diner. "If it isn't the woman poisoning our kids' minds. You shouldn't be here, Mitchell. You should be at home, packing your bags." "Get out of my way, Vince," Elena said, her voice steady. "Or what? You gonna use your wellness techniques on me?" The group laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. Vince leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale beer and malice. "We're tired of people like you. We're taking our school back, and you're done." He reached out, grabbing Elena's arm, his grip like a vice. Sarah tried to stand up, but one of the women pushed her back down. The diner, once a place of mundane comfort, was suddenly a cage. "Let go of me," Elena said, her voice dropping an octave. Vince laughed and pulled her toward the door. "Let's take this outside, shall we? Let's show everyone what a radical looks like." He yanked her, but Elena didn't stumble. She used his momentum, her hand reaching for a heavy metal kitchen tray sitting on the edge of the counter. She swung it with everything she had, the edge of the tray catching Vince across the bridge of his nose. The sound of breaking bone was sickeningly loud. Vince howled, his hands flying to his face, blood spraying across his white t-shirt. "Go!" Elena screamed at Sarah, but the secretary was frozen in terror. The group lunged for her. Elena didn't wait. She ducked under a swinging fist, shoved a chair into the path of another man, and bolted for the kitchen. She burst through the swinging doors, the heat of the grill hitting her like a wall. "Hey, you can't be back here," the cook shouted. But Elena was already at the back door. She flung it open and stumbled into the alley. The ground was slick with grease and rainwater, her flat sliding as she scrambled toward the street. Behind her, she could hear the shouting, the heavy thud of boots on the pavement. She didn't look back. She ran until her lungs burned, until the sound of the mob faded into the distance. She found her car, the one she had managed to get towed and fixed in the early hours, parked 3 blocks away. She scrambled inside, locking the doors, her heart a frantic bird against her ribs. She reached for her laptop, her fingers fumbling with the login. She needed to see the bank records. She needed to see the money. She logged into the joint account she shared with Marcus. She had always trusted him to handle the big finances, believing her own salary and the occasional bonus were enough to keep them comfortable. But as the statements loaded, her blood turned to ice. There were deposits, massive, round numbers. October, $10,000. November, $15,000. January, $20,000. The source was listed as a private trust. The Vaughn estate. Gloria's maiden name. Elena felt a wave of nausea so strong she had to lean her head against the steering wheel. The bonuses she thought she had earned for her hard work, the extra money that had paid for their vacations, for the new roof, for the very car she was sitting in. It was all Gloria's. Marcus hadn't just been lying about his mother's influence. He had been a paid employee of her manipulation. He had sold his wife's independence for a steady stream of silver. She printed the records, the small portable printer in her back seat whirring like a death rattle. She had the proof now, not just of the sabotage, but of the betrayal that sat at the heart of her home. She drove back to the house, the sun now high and cruel in the sky. Marcus was in the kitchen, drinking coffee as if the world weren't ending. She threw the bank records on the table. How much, Marcus? How much did she pay you to keep me quiet? To keep me hysterical while she dismantled my life? Marcus looked at the papers. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. He just took a sip of his coffee and set the mug down with a soft clink. It wasn't like that, Elena, he said, his voice flat. We were drowning. The mortgage, the lifestyle you wanted, your salary didn't cover it. Mother was just helping. She wanted us to be happy. Happy? She's destroying me. And you took her money while she did it. I took the money to keep us afloat, Marcus shouted, finally losing his cool. He stood up, his face flushed. You think you're so independent, so good? You're living in a house bought by the woman you hate. You're driving a car fueled by her donations. You're just as much a part of this as I am, Elena. You just didn't want to look at the bill. Elena looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't feel anger. She felt a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. I'm leaving, Marcus, and I'm taking everything. You have nothing, he sneered. Mother owns the house. She owns the accounts. You leave, and you leave with the clothes on your back and a reputation that's already in the trash. I have the truth, she said, her voice a whisper. And that's the one thing Gloria can't buy. She walked out, the sound of his laughter following her like a curse. She headed for the school, but as she pulled into the lot, she saw the flashing lights. The principal, a man who had always looked at Elena with a mixture of fear and resentment, was waiting at the door. Beside him were 2 security guards. Elena Mitchell, the principal said, his voice loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. You are hereby suspended, effective immediately. There are serious allegations regarding your wellness curriculum, claims of radical indoctrination and financial misconduct. You are barred from the building until the investigation is complete. Elena looked past him. There, in a black Mercedes parked at the edge of the lot, was Gloria. She was wearing a cream-colored suit, her silver hair perfect, a slight, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She didn't look away. She watched as the guards took Elena's badge, as the crowd of concerned parents began to boo. Elena turned and walked back to her car. She was done. She had lost. But as she sat in the driver's seat, her head in her hands, she felt something hit her foot. A folder, a plain manila folder she hadn't seen before. She opened it. Inside was a ledger. handwritten, detailed. Gloria M., $50,000 to Parental Rights Fund. Source, School Board Maintenance Account. Gloria M., $10,000 to Vince R. for security services. It was Sarah's handwriting, a final, desperate act of contrition. Sarah hadn't just been a mole, she had been a bookkeeper for the rot. Elena looked at the town hall clock. The PTA meeting was in 20 minutes. The accreditation committee would be there. It was her only chance. She started the car, but as she pulled onto the highway, a shadow filled her rearview mirror. A black SUV. Gloria's driver. He didn't try to pass. He didn't try to hide. He simply accelerated, his front bumper slamming into Elena's car with a bone-jarring crunch. Elena gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. She was on the rural outskirts now, the road winding along the edge of a deep, jagged ravine. The SUV hit her again, harder this time, sending her car skidding toward the rusted guardrail. "Stop it!" she screamed, though no one could hear her. The driver rammed her a third time, a calculated, lethal blow to her rear quarter panel. Elena's car spun, the world becoming a blur of gray asphalt and green trees. She felt the sickening lurch as the wheels left the pavement. The car tumbled. Once. Twice. The sound of rending metal and shattering glass filled the air. Then, silence. Elena opened her eyes. She was upside down, the smell of gasoline and hot oil thick in the air. Her head throbbed, a warm trickle of blood running down her temple. But her hands were still moving. She reached for the passenger seat, her fingers closing around the manila folder. She crawled out of the smoking wreckage, her sensible flats ruined, her blazer torn. She looked up at the road. The black SUV was gone. They thought she was dead. Or at least, they thought she was broken. She began to climb. Her nails dug into the damp earth, her breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Every inch was a battle against the gravity of her own life. But she reached the top. She stood on the edge of the highway, bruised and bleeding, and began to walk toward the town hall. She arrived as the meeting was starting. She slipped through the back door, a ghost in a ruined suit. On the stage, Marcus stood next to Gloria. He was holding a microphone, his voice echoing through the crowded auditorium. "It is with a heavy heart," Marcus said, his voice trembling with a practiced, hollow grief, "that I must inform you that my wife, Elena, is suffering from a severe mental breakdown. Her recent behavior, the paranoia, the violence at the diner, it's all a result of work-related stress. I have signed the documents for her involuntary commitment, for her own safety, and for the safety of our children." He handed the paper to a court official. The room was silent. Gloria smiled, a small, cold curve of her lips. Elena stepped out of the shadows. "I'm not going anywhere, Marcus," she said, her voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. The crowd gasped. Marcus went pale, the microphone nearly slipping from his hand. Gloria's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Two police officers moved toward Elena, their hands on their belts. "Stay back," Elena said, her voice dropping into that clinical, de-escalating tone. "I am not a threat. I am a victim of an attempted murder, and I have the evidence." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked to the podium, the officers hesitating at the sheer, cold authority in her voice. She laid the ledger on the table. "This is a record of embezzlement," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone Marcus had dropped. "Gloria Mitchell has been using school board funds to pay for the protests you see outside. She has been paying thugs like Vince to intimidate teachers. and she hired a driver to run me off the road 20 minutes ago. She played the recording on her phone. The sound of the SUV slamming into her car, the driver's muffled voice on a radio. She's over the edge. It's done. The auditorium erupted. The accreditation committee members stood up, their faces masks of shock and disgust. "And one more thing," Elena said, looking directly at Gloria. "The radical curriculum you've been attacking? The one you say is destroying our values? It was written by your late husband, Gloria. These are his private journals. He believed in emotional resilience. He believed in the very things you're trying to kill." Gloria tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. But the crowd's jeers drowned her out. She was no longer a queen. She was a fraud. Marcus looked at Elena, then at his mother. He looked at the blood on Elena's face, the strength in her eyes, and for the first time in his life, he saw the cost of his cowardice. He stepped between them. He took the microphone. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words echoing through the room. "I'm so sorry. I rescind the statement. My wife is the strongest person I know. And my mother is a monster." The police moved in, but they weren't going for Elena. They were heading for Gloria. Elena walked out of the town hall. She didn't wait for the apologies. She didn't wait for Marcus. She walked into the cool night air and breathed. Hours later, she sat in her kitchen. The house was dark, the silence finally peaceful. The black lily was gone, thrown into the trash where it belonged. She opened the window. The scent of damp earth and night air filled the room. She was alone. Her marriage was dead. Her home was a relic. But as she looked at her hands, still stained with the dirt of the ravine, she realized she could finally see them. They weren't shaking. She was free. And for the first time in her life, the air was clean,